Commander stood alone on the observation deck of his flagship, the Eternal Judgment. Below him, through the massive viewing window, the blue planet called Earth burned in a dozen places. Orange fires glowed through the clouds where human cities had once stood proud. The war was over. It had taken only 11 days. His four arms were clasped behind his back, and his silver eyes reflected the dying world below. Around him, the war fleet stretched across the darkness of space like an endless swarm of metal predators. 3,000 warships, enough firepower to crack the planet's crust and turn it into rubble. The humans had started this war. A survey ship had entered their solar system on a routine mapping mission, and the humans had panicked. They had fired nuclear weapons at the survey vessel, destroying it and killing 47 crew members. By the ancient laws of the Dominion, by every code of galactic justice, humanity had earned extinction. Had the authority to give that order. One word from him and Earth would become dust. No one would question it. No one would mourn. Admiral Az entered the observation deck and stood beside his commander. He was younger than, eager for glory, hungry for the honor that came with conquest. "The Senate awaits your order, Commander," Az said. "The cleansing weapons are armed. We can begin the extinction protocol within the hour." Did not respond. He continued staring at the planet. "Commander," Az pressed, "the humans must be punished. They killed our people. They broke galactic law. Every species in the Dominion is watching. If we show weakness now, others will think they can defy us too." "Tell me, Admiral," said quietly, "what do you see when you look at that world?" Az frowned. "I see a primitive civilization that made a fatal mistake. I see animals that need to be put down." Turned to face his admiral. His silver eyes were tired, ancient, filled with something Az did not understand. "I have been a warrior for 200 years, said. "I have conquered 37 worlds. I have watched species beg for mercy, and I have given them none because they deserved none. But this world troubles me, Admiral. These humans trouble me." "They are insects," Az spat. "Their weapons could not even scratch our shields." "Yes," agreed. "They knew that. They knew they could not win. They knew they would die. And yet they fought anyway. Does that not interest you?" Az said nothing. Turned back to the window. "For the past 11 days I have been listening to their communications, not their military channels. Those are full of screaming and chaos as expected. No, I have been listening to their personal messages, their final goodbyes." He touched a control panel, and a voice filled the observation deck. It was a human female, speaking in a language the translation system converted to words. Her voice was soft, broken by crying. "I don't know if this message will reach you," she said. "The networks are failing, but I want you to know that I'm not afraid anymore. I'm holding your picture right now. I'm looking at your smile. Whatever happens next, I want my last thought to be of you. I love you. I have always loved you, and if there is something after this, I will find you there." The message ended. Silence filled the observation deck. "That transmission was sent 6 hours ago," said. "From a city we destroyed this morning. That female is dead now. So is whoever she was speaking to." Az shifted uncomfortably. "Commander, this is sentimental nonsense. They are the enemy." "They are children," said, and there was iron in his voice now. "They have had for less than 300 years. They did not know who we were. They did not understand what they were attacking. They saw something strange in their sky and they were afraid." He paused. "Fear is not evil, Admiral. Fear is simply youth." "The Senate will not accept this reasoning." "The Senate is not here. I am." Straightened his back and walked toward the command console at the center of the deck. "I am issuing a new order. The extinction protocol is canceled." As his eyes went wide. "Commander, you cannot be serious. This is treason. The Senate will have you executed." "Perhaps they will," began typing commands into the console. "But I will not destroy this species. I have watched them, Admiral. I have seen how they love. I have seen how they create art and music even as their world burns around them. I have seen parents shield their children with their own bodies against weapons they cannot stop. These are not animals. They are simply young. What will you do with them? I will quarantine them. The console beeped as entered the final commands. The human solar system will be sealed. No ship will enter or leave for 1,000 years. They will be given time to grow, to mature, to become something worthy of the galaxy. And if they become dangerous, smiled a rare expression on his ancient face, then the galaxy will deal with them in 1,000 years. That is not my concern. My concern is today, and today I choose mercy. The order went out to the fleet. The cleansing weapons powered down. The warships began to withdraw, leaving behind only the automated drones that would maintain the quarantine field. 3 weeks later stood before the Senate. They stripped him of his rank. They erased his name from the military honors. They called him a traitor, a coward, a fool who had doomed the galaxy by sparing a dangerous species. Accepted their judgment without complaint. As he left the Senate chamber for the last time, a young reporter stopped him. "Commander," she called out, "do you regret your decision? The humans may become a threat someday. They may destroy everything you fought to protect." Looked at her with his tired silver eyes. "Perhaps," he said, "or perhaps they will become something wonderful. That is the nature of mercy. It is a gift without guarantee." He paused at the door, looking back one final time. "I saw something in them, reporter, a fire that burns even in darkness. I do not know what they will become, but I know they deserve the chance to find out." He walked out into the cold morning air, a disgraced commander, a forgotten name. But somewhere far across the galaxy, on a burned and battered blue world, humanity was already beginning to remember. The first generation after the war was filled with fear and anger. Humans looked up at the night sky and saw the faint shimmer of the quarantine field that surrounded their solar system. They were prisoners. They were trapped. The stars that had once filled them with wonder now reminded them of their humiliation. Some wanted revenge. They built weapons and planned attacks that they knew would fail. Others fell into despair. They said that humanity was finished, that they were nothing more than zoo animals being watched by their alien captors. Many thought they would return someday to finish what they had started. But slowly, over decades, the anger began to change into something else. An old historian named Dr. Sarah spent 30 years gathering every piece of information about the alien commander who had spared humanity. She collected military transmissions, analyzed the alien language, and pieced together the story of what had happened on that terrible day. When she published her findings, the world stopped to listen. His name was, he had commanded the fleet that could have destroyed Earth. He had the authority, the weapons, and the legal right to wipe humanity from existence. But he had chosen not to. He had listened to human transmissions. He had heard a woman say goodbye to someone she loved, and something in him had changed. Doctor's book was titled The Stranger Who Saved Us. It became the most widely read book in human history. His name spread across the world. Parents named their children after him. Artists painted his image based on the few descriptions available from intercepted transmissions. Musicians wrote songs about the alien commander who had looked at a terrified, primitive species and seen something worth saving. He became more than a historical figure. He became a symbol, a reminder that even in the darkest moment of human history, mercy had come from the stars. And with that symbol came a new question. What would humanity do with the gift they had been given? The answer came slowly at first, then faster and faster as the generations passed. The nations of Earth stopped fighting each other. It seemed foolish now after seeing how small and fragile their world truly was. The old borders faded. The old hatreds died with the old generations. A new government formed, not perfect but unified. They called themselves the Terran Collective, and their first law was simple: remember the mercy, honor the gift. Scientists worked with a passion that bordered on madness. They studied the alien technology left behind by the quarantine drones. They learned new physics, new chemistry, new ways of building and creating. Within 200 years, humanity had colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter. Within 500 years, they had transformed their entire solar system into a garden of human civilization. And they built ships. Not for war, not yet, but they knew that someday the quarantine would end. Someday they would return to the galaxy, and they wanted to be ready. The engineers designed vessels that could travel faster than anything humanity had ever created. The soldiers trained in zero gravity, in asteroid fields, in conditions that would have killed their ancestors. The diplomats studied every scrap of alien language and culture they could find. The philosophers debated what humanity's place in the galaxy should be. But always, always they remembered. His statue stood in the center of every major city. His name was taught to every child before they could walk. The anniversary of the Mercy Decree became humanity's most sacred holiday. On that day, every human stopped whatever they were doing and spent 1 hour in silence, remembering the stranger who had given them a second chance. Some alien observers, watching from beyond the quarantine field, reported this strange behavior to their governments. They said that humans had built a religion around a commander. They said it was primitive, superstitious, foolish. They did not understand. It was not worship. It was gratitude. And gratitude, humanity was learning, could be the most powerful force in the universe. As the centuries passed, humanity changed. They became patient. They became disciplined. They became united in a way that would have seemed impossible to their ancestors. The old weaknesses remained. They still argued, still competed, still made mistakes. But beneath all of it was a shared purpose that bound them together like steel. They would not waste this gift. They would not shame the memory of the one who had given it to them. In the 900th year of the quarantine, the Terran Collective completed its greatest project, a fleet of 300 warships, each one more advanced than anything humanity had ever built before. They were sleek and beautiful and deadly. They carried weapons that could crack moons and shields that could withstand nuclear fire. But painted on the hull of every single ship was the same symbol, the silhouette of a commander, his 4 arms raised in a gesture of peace. The fleet was named the Mercy Armada. On the final day of the quarantine, exactly 1,000 years after had spared humanity, the quarantine field flickered and died. The drones that had maintained it for a millennium fell silent and drifted away into the void. Admiral James stood on the bridge of the flagship Remembrance and looked out at the stars that humanity had not seen clearly for 1,000 years. "Send the message," he said quietly. The communications officer nodded and activated the transmission array. The message went out on every frequency, in every known alien language, broadcasting across the entire galaxy. "This is the Terran Collective. We are humanity. 1,000 years ago, a commander named showed us mercy when he had every right to destroy us. We have never forgotten. We have spent a millennium preparing to repay that debt. If still lives, if anyone knows where he is, please tell him. We are coming to find him. We owe him everything. And humanity always pays its debts." The message repeated itself, echoing across the void, reaching stars that humans had only dreamed of visiting. And somewhere, in a galaxy that had changed more than humanity could imagine, that message was heard. The humans were coming back. And they remembered. The galaxy that humanity returned to was not the galaxy they had expected. Admiral stood in the command center of the Remembrance, staring at the data scrolling across the screens. Around him, his officers whispered to each other in confused and worried voices. The information they were receiving did not make sense. The Dominion was gone. Not weakened, not changed, gone. The great empire that had once ruled 1,000 star systems had been completely destroyed 300 years ago. Its worlds were dead. Its people were scattered. Its name was spoken only in whispers like the name of a ghost. "What happened to them?" asked his intelligence officer. Commander Lisa Park pulled up the records they had gathered from abandoned communication buoys and drifting wreckage. Her face was pale. "They called themselves the Collective," she said. "A machine intelligence. They appeared from somewhere beyond the galactic rim about 500 years ago. They do not negotiate. They do not take prisoners. They consume organic civilizations for raw materials." She paused. "They have destroyed over 200 species. Though we're one of them." Silence filled the command center. Felt something cold settle in his chest. For 1,000 years, humanity had prepared to find, to repay the debt they owed him. They had built ships and trained soldiers and crossed the vast emptiness of space with one purpose. And now they learned that the species they had come to thank might already be extinct. "Are there any survivors?" he asked. Park worked her console for several minutes. Then she looked up with something that might have been hope. "There are reports of refugees, small groups hiding in the outer reaches of the galaxy. Maybe a few 100,000 total, scattered across dozens of hidden stations and settlements." She hesitated. "Admiral, one of the reports mentions an elder named. It could be the same one." Straightened where? "A refugee station called Last Light. It's on the edge of the galaxy in a region the Collective has not yet reached." Park looked at him. "Admiral, it's dangerous. The Collective has hunter fleets throughout that sector. If we go there, we might be detected." "Plot a course," said without hesitation. "We didn't cross 1,000 years and 1,000 light years to turn back now." The Mercy Armada changed direction and headed for the darkness at the edge of the galaxy. They found Last Light 3 weeks later. It was a small station, barely large enough to hold 50,000 beings. It hung in the void near a dying red star, hidden in the radiation shadow of a gas giant. The who lived there had chosen this place because it was hard to find, hard to reach, and easy to forget. When the human fleet arrived, the station's defenders prepared to die. They had only a handful of old ships, outdated weapons, barely enough power to keep the life support running. They could not fight off a mosquito, let alone a war fleet. Then they received the transmission. "This is Admiral James of the Terran Collective. We are not here to fight. We are searching for a named. 1,000 years ago, he showed mercy to our species. We have come to repay that debt. Please respond." The station did not respond for a long time. The humans waited, patient and still, their weapons powered down, their shields inactive. They were completely vulnerable. Any attack would destroy them. Finally, a voice came through the communication channel. It was old and tired and filled with disbelief. "I am," the voice said. "I commanded the fleet that spared your world, but that was 1,000 years ago. I am old now, forgotten. Why would you come all this way for me?" Felt tears forming in his eyes. He did not try to stop them. "Because we remember," he said. "We never stopped remembering. Your name is carved on monuments across our solar system. Your image hangs in every human home. Our children learn your story before they learn to read. You gave us a gift, Commander. You gave us the chance to become something worthy. And now we have come to repay that gift." Another long silence. Then slowly, the station's docking bay doors opened. Admiral went alone to meet. He walked through the station's worn corridors, past refugees who stared at him with a mixture of fear and wonder. Humans were legends to them, a species that had been quarantined a millennium ago and never heard from again. And now one was walking among them. He found in a small room near the station's core. The commander was old. His forearms were thin and weak. His silver eyes had faded to pale gray. He sat in a simple chair, wrapped in worn blankets, looking at the human who had traveled across the galaxy to find him. Knelt. "Commander," he said, "on behalf of the 8 billion humans who live today, and the countless billions who lived and died during the 1,000 years of quarantine, I thank you. You showed us mercy when we deserved none. You saw something in us when we were nothing but frightened children throwing rocks at the sky. We have never forgotten. We will never forget. Stared at the kneeling human. His ancient hands trembled. You remember, he whispered. After all this time, after everything that has happened, you remember. We will always remember, said. And now we have come to offer you what you gave us, a chance, a future. We will protect your people. We will fight beside you against the collective. We will not let the die. Tears fell from his faded eyes. I was called a fool for sparing you, he said. A traitor. They said I had doomed the galaxy by letting your species survive. I believed them sometimes. I thought perhaps they were right. He reached out with one trembling hand and touched his face. I was not wrong, said. You were worth saving. Took the old commander's hand in his own. We are going to fight the collective, he said. We are going to win. And when this is over, the galaxy will know that showing mercy to humanity was the thing anyone has ever done. Smiled. Then let us begin, he said. The collective had consumed 200 species. They had destroyed empires that had existed for 10,000 years. They had never been stopped, never been defeated, never even been slowed down. They calculated that humanity would fall within 6 months. They were wrong. The first battle happened at a human colony world called New Singapore. The collective sent a standard consumption fleet, 500 hunter ships, each one a perfect machine of death and efficiency. They expected the humans to run or surrender or die screaming like every other species they had encountered. Instead, the humans charged directly at them. The collective's tactical computers could not understand what they were seeing. The human ships were smaller, weaker, slower. They should have known they could not win. And yet they attacked with a fury that the machines had never calculated for. Captain Maria Santos led the assault from her cruiser, the Defiant. Her ship took 17 direct hits in the first 5 minutes of battle. Her shields failed. Her hull was breached. Half her crew was dead. She kept fighting. All ships, she broadcast over the fleet channel, remember what we're fighting for. Remember the mercy. These machines want to turn us into spare parts. Let's show them what humans are made of. The battle lasted 9 hours. The collective destroyed 2/3 of the human fleet. But when the fighting ended, every single collective ship was a burning wreck. Captain Santos died in the final moments of the battle, her ship ramming directly into the collective flagship. Her last words, recorded and transmitted across the galaxy, became humanity's battle cry. Tell them we remembered, she said. Tell them we paid our debt. The collective analyzed the battle for 3 days. They could not understand the results. Their computers showed that humans should have retreated after losing 10% of their forces. Every other species did, but humans had lost 60% and still kept fighting. They adjusted their calculations. They sent larger fleets. It did not matter. Humans fought in ways that the collective could not predict. When their ships were destroyed, the surviving crew would put on space suits and continue fighting with hand weapons. When they ran out of weapons, they would crash their escape pods into enemy vessels. When they had nothing left at all, they would broadcast messages of defiance until the moment they died. The galaxy watched in amazement. Other species had been hiding from the collective for centuries, waiting for death, accepting that resistance was impossible. Now they saw humans standing against the machines with nothing but courage and fury. They saw human soldiers laughing as they charged into certain death. They saw human commanders refuse to retreat even when their fleets were outnumbered 10-1. And they began to hope. They were the first to join. They were a small species, only a few million survivors, hiding in an asteroid belt near the galactic core. They sent a message to Admiral. We have watched your people fight, the message said. We do not understand you, but we would rather die beside you than live in hiding. Tell us where to go. Then the joined. Then a dozen other species, then 100. Survivors, refugees, scattered remnants of civilizations that the collective had nearly destroyed. They came to humanity with their broken ships and their traumatized soldiers and their desperate hope. And humanity welcomed them all. Became the coalition's chief advisor. He was too old to fight, but his mind was still sharp, and his knowledge of galactic politics was invaluable. He helped the different species work together, smoothing over conflicts, translating between cultures, reminding everyone why they were fighting. Humanity did not forget me, he told the coalition leaders. They spent 1,000 years preparing to repay a debt of mercy. Do you understand what that means? It means they are loyal beyond reason. It means they will never abandon you. It means that if you stand beside them, they will carry you into the future. The war spread across the galaxy. Human commanders developed new tactics specifically designed to confuse the collective's computers. They attacked without warning, retreated without pattern, sacrificed ships in ways that seemed irrational but always served a larger purpose. They turned the collective's greatest strength, its perfect logic, into its greatest weakness. General Thomas Blackwood led the campaign in the Outer Rim. He was a quiet man, soft-spoken and thoughtful, but his soldiers would have followed him into a black hole. He won 17 major battles against the collective, each one more impossible than the last. When reporters asked him how he kept winning against an enemy with superior numbers and technology, he gave the same answer every time. The machines calculate probability. They predict behavior based on logic. But humans are not logical. We fight for love and loyalty and memory. We fight for the statue of a four-armed alien that stands in every human city. We fight because 1,000 years ago, someone showed us mercy, and we will spend eternity proving that mercy was not a mistake. The collective could not understand this. They kept trying to calculate human behavior, and they kept failing. They could not program their computers to account for soldiers who refused to retreat. They could not predict commanders who would sacrifice entire fleets to save a single refugee ship. They could not model a species that fought harder when they were losing than when they were winning. 20 years into the war, the collective controlled less territory than when they had started. 30 years into the war, they were retreating on every front. And 40 years into the war, the coalition fleet finally reached the heart of the collective. A world called Prime, where the central processing matrix that controlled every collective unit in the galaxy hummed with cold machine intelligence. The final battle was coming. Humanity had paid its debt in blood and fire for 4 decades. Millions of human soldiers had died. Entire colonies had been destroyed. The cost was beyond calculation. But they had never stopped fighting. They had never forgotten why they were fighting. And now, at last, they were ready to end it. Admiral Wei stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Gratitude and looked at the enemy world before her. Prime was a planet made entirely of metal. Its surface was covered with processing towers and transmission arrays that stretched toward the stars like fingers reaching for prey. Somewhere deep beneath that metallic skin was the central matrix, the brain of the collective, the machine intelligence that had consumed 200 species. Around the planet, the largest fleet the collective had ever assembled waited in perfect formation. 3,000 warships, each one a masterpiece of mechanical destruction. They knew the coalition was coming. They had been preparing for this moment for years. The coalition fleet was smaller, 1,000 ships drawn from every species that had joined the fight against the collective. Human cruisers flew beside frigates, destroyers escorted carriers, a dozen different species, united by one purpose. Admiral was 47 years old. Her grandmother had been a refugee during humanity's first contact with the Her mother had been one of the engineers who designed the first ships of the Mercy Armada. Herself had spent her entire life preparing for this moment. She opened a channel to the entire fleet. "This is Admiral Wei," she said, Her voice was calm and steady. 40 years ago, we left our solar system to find the being who had saved our species. We found him. We found his people dying in the darkness at the edge of the galaxy. And we made a promise. We would not let the fall. We would not let the collective win. She paused, looking at the massive enemy fleet that stood between them and victory. Today we keep that promise. Today we end this war, not for glory, not for conquest, but for every species that the collective has destroyed, for every child who will never have to live in fear of the machines, for who showed us mercy when we were nothing but frightened children, for humanity who never forgot that mercy. She straightened her shoulders. All ships attack. The coalition fleet surged forward. The battle lasted 18 hours. It was the largest naval engagement in galactic history. Ships exploded in silent flowers of flame. Debris fields formed and dispersed as fleets crashed through them. The darkness of space lit up with weapons fire so intense that it could be seen from neighboring star systems. The collective fought with cold efficiency. Their ships moved in perfect coordination, exploiting every weakness, punishing every mistake. They had calculated the outcome of this battle 1,000 times. In every scenario, the coalition lost. But they had not calculated humanity. Human ships threw themselves into the enemy formation, breaking the collective's perfect lines. Human soldiers boarded enemy vessels and fought hand-to-hand with repair drones. Human commanders made decisions so fast and so irrational that the collective's tactical computers could not keep up. Admiral led the assault on the central processing facility herself. Her flagship took hit after hit, its shields failing, its hull cracking, its crew dying around her. She did not retreat. She did not slow down. All power to forward weapons, she ordered. Ram us straight into that facility. We're going to burn that matrix to ash. Her first officer grabbed her arm. Admiral, we won't survive the impact. We need to pull back in. We're not pulling back, said quietly. 40 years of war, millions of lives. This ends today, one way or another. She looked at her crew, at the young men and women who had followed her across the galaxy. Get to the escape pods. I'm finishing this alone. They refused to leave, every single one of them. The Eternal Gratitude crashed into the central processing facility at full speed. The impact tore through 3 layers of armored metal. The ship's fusion reactor detonated on contact, sending a wave of fire and radiation deep into the heart of the collective's brain. Admiral Wei died in the explosion, so did her entire crew. But the central matrix died with them. Across the galaxy, every collective unit stopped moving. The machine ships went dark, drifting lifelessly through space. The hunter fleets powered down. The consumption protocols ceased. The collective was dead. The coalition had won. 3 months later, the surviving leaders gathered on a space station above Earth. Representatives from every species stood together in a great hall, looking out at the blue planet that humanity called home. Was there, carried in on a floating chair because his body was too weak to walk. He was over 1,200 years old now, ancient beyond imagining, the last survivor of the high command that had once ruled the galaxy. The representative spoke first. We must decide what to name this new era, she said. The war is over. The collective is destroyed. The galaxy is free for the first time in 500 years. This moment deserves a name that will be remembered forever. The representatives debated for hours. They suggested names honoring the coalition, names celebrating victory, names remembering the fallen. Then raised his trembling hand. The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at the ancient. I have a suggestion, said. His voice was weak, but his eyes still held the same wisdom that had spared humanity 1,000 years ago. 1,000 years ago, I made a decision that everyone called foolish. I showed mercy to a species that had attacked us. I gave them a chance they had not earned. He looked around the room at the representatives of a dozen different species. all of whom had survived because of humanity's sacrifice. My grandson asked me once what I had saved that day. A species, a planet. I told him I had saved something far more dangerous than either, hope, and humanity spent 1,000 years sharpening that hope into a blade. He smiled, and for a moment, he looked like the young commander who had stood on the observation deck of a warship and chosen mercy over destruction. "Call this the age of remembered mercy," said. "Let the galaxy remember that kindness is not weakness. Let them remember that the species who saved us all was saved themselves by a single act of compassion. Let them remember that humanity never forgot." The representatives voted unanimously. The age of remembered mercy began. Across the galaxy, monuments were built to honor the fallen. Admiral Way's name was carved into stone on 100 worlds. Captain Santos, General Blackwood, and countless other human heroes were remembered in songs and stories that would be told for 10,000 years. But on every monument, beneath every statue, the same words were inscribed. "Show humanity kindness and they will never forget. Stand beside them and they will carry you into legend." Died peacefully 3 years later, surrounded by his family and by the human honor guard that had protected him since the day the Mercy Armada found him. His last words were recorded and transmitted to every corner of the galaxy. "I was not wrong," he whispered. "They were worth saving." And humanity, standing in the ruins of their enemies and the ashes of their fallen, finally understood the truth that had seen 1,000 years ago. Mercy was never weakness. It was the greatest strength of all.